heard a loud noise, and the plane started shaking like nothing I've ever experienced before. It was sound like the plane was coming apart. And I think it was pretty quickly figured out that something had happened to the engine.
What caused Southwest Airlines to make an emergency landing in Philadelphia yesterday? One woman died, was sucked out of the plane. Sounds like it's a horror movie. Alex Stone, ABC News correspondent, is following the story. Good morning, Alex.
McGraw, good morning to you. And the captain of the Boeing 737, we now know, was one of the military's first female F-18 pilots. She is getting praise this morning for her calm demeanor as she landed the crippled plane. She had a lot going on in that moment, along with her first officer. One, they had engine failures. They had a power problem. They had lost 50% of their power. They had holes in the plane. It was ripped open, so now they had to be careful not to make them worse or to rip the plane apart with whatever they did maneuver-wise. They had a rapid depressurization, the masks coming down, people unable to breathe on board, eardrums popping, would quickly get very cold. They had to get that plane down quickly, which they did, going from 32,000 feet down to 10,000 feet in a matter of minutes, a very quick drop. And they had a medical emergency on board. They had people who were injured. They had Jennifer Reardon, a marketing executive, mother of two from Albuquerque, who was critically injured. CPR was being done on her on board the plane. She ended up dying when they got to Philadelphia. But an incredible scene on board the 737.
The Southwest Airlines plane took off from New York, landed in Philly, so clearly it was a short flight. Something clearly went wrong early on. Do we know what happened to the engine?
Well, we know it exploded, and it most likely was an uncontained engine failure, but there's a very specific definition of what is an uncontained engine failure. When the housing of the engine does not keep the engine together. Engines fail, but in a case like this, they explode, and they're so violent that they go outside of that housing. Most likely, this appears that's what this was, because pieces went everywhere. Now, the NTSB focusing in on potential metal fatigue, saying this a couple hours ago.
Our preliminary examination of this was that there's evidence of metal fatigue where the blade separated.
The NTSB takes about a year to a year and a half to come up with a cause, but that's what they're seeing so far. And there was a case of uncontained engine failure in one of Southwest's 737-700s back in 2016. The engine exploded, also the left engine. The fuselage had damage, the cabin depressurized. Same type of engine, what's known as a CFM56. In that case, the NTSB found the fan blades had fatigue. Those blades made out of titanium alloy and copper nickel alloy. So they're going to have to look now. Is there something about older engines? This engine had 40,000 cycles. That's 40,000 takeoffs and landings. The plane was older as well. Is there something about this engine in design, in maintenance, and when it gets older that the metal begins to fatigue? Maybe, maybe not. The NTSB is going to look at it.
It sounds like you were mentioning the pilot. It sounds like some of the passengers tried to do their best to save this woman.
Well, they definitely did. She was getting sucked out of the engine, or out of the window that opened up after the engine exploded, and two passengers jumped in and were pulling her back in from getting sucked out. And then, according to this registered nurse on board, they tried to save her life.
We did CPR on this lady who actually had the suction from the plane. The window had broken, and the suction, negative pressure, had pulled her outside the plane partially.
And then there were several other passengers who had minor injuries, but all of this going on. And again, remember, the pilots didn't have time or the ability to communicate with those in the back, so they immediately put the plane into a pretty quick descent. Everybody on board reporting to us that they thought they were crashing at that moment. They heard the explosion. There was a hole in the side of the plane, a passenger being sucked out, and then they were going down fast. People were sending messages, trying to get on the plane's Wi-Fi to tell their loved ones that they were going down and that they loved them. That was the pilots getting down to a breathable altitude. Some of the flight attendants were, according to passengers, they were crying as they were running and trying to help people. It was a very chaotic situation on board.
Alex Stone, this is the first time someone died on a Southwest Airlines flight, isn't it?
Yeah, first time ever, a passenger as a result of an accident. They, like every airline, they've had medical emergencies. They've had other accidents where there was a case in Chicago several years ago where they didn't stop in time on the runway and hit a car on the other side of the runway, of the barrier. But the first time a passenger on board in an accident has died on Southwest, that was a record that Southwest was very proud of. And this is the first time there has been a fatality on a domestic airliner in the U.S. since 2009, when the Colgan Air flight went down in upstate New York. There was, in 2013 in San Francisco, the Oceana crash, the 777, but that was an international airliner of a domestic airline, the first time since 2000. It's been almost a decade since somebody has died as a result of an accident on a U.S. airline.
Alex Stone, thanks for checking in. Have a good day.
You got it. Thanks, McGraw.